At 5:14 a.m. on September 3, 1944, Sergeant Carlos Norman Hathcock II lay motionless in a Vietnamese rice paddy 900 meters from a North Vietnamese Army command tent. He had been in that position for 53 hours. He had not eaten, he had not slept, he had not moved, not once in 2 full days and 5 hours. The temperature was 38 degrees Celsius, humidity 97%. His body was submerged to his chin in warm, stagnant water. Fire ants had built a colony in the mud 6 inches from his left hand. He had felt them crawling across his knuckles for 11 hours. He had not moved. His rifle was a Winchester Model 70 chambered in .30-06 Springfield. No bipod, no suppressor. Standard Marine issue scope, 8-power magnification. He had zeroed it himself at 100 yards, then calculated the adjustment tables for every 50-yard increment out to 1,000. In the North Vietnamese Army command tent 900 meters away, a North Vietnamese Army general was eating breakfast. Hathcock had crawled 1,400 meters through open paddy to reach this position. The crawl took 53 hours. He moved only when the wind moved the grass. He moved only when artillery masked the sound of his movement. He calculated that he covered an average of 26 meters per hour. He was 30 years old. He was completely blind in his left eye. His left eye had been deteriorating since age 17 from a degenerative condition his military records listed simply as a visual field defect. By 1964, when he deployed to Vietnam for the first time, his left eye registered only light and shadow, no clarity, no focus, no targeting capability whatsoever. He aimed, acquired, ranged, windage corrected, and fired exclusively through his right eye. Every single one of his confirmed kills, 93 confirmed, an estimated 300 plus probable, was achieved with one functioning eye. The United States Marine Corps Sniper Manual did not account for this. No military manual did. There was no protocol, no modified technique, no adjusted training program for a one-eyed sniper. Hathcock built his own method in his head, alone. And in approximately 45 seconds, that method was about to end the life of a North Vietnamese general. None of the 40 soldiers guarding that command tent knew Hathcock was there. He had been 900 meters away, invisible in the open, for 2 days. Stay with me, because what happened at 5:17 a.m. changed everything, and it is not what you think. Carlos Norman Hathcock II was born May 20th, 1942, in Little Rock, Arkansas. His father was absent. His mother was struggling. By age 7, Hathcock was living with his grandmother in the rural town of Geyer Springs, Arkansas. The house had no central heating. The nearest grocery store was 11 miles away. They were poor. Not inconvenienced poor, genuinely materially poor. The kind of poor where food is a planning problem, not a preference. Hathcock's grandmother had a solution. She handed him a rifle, a Remington .22 caliber bolt action, single shot. She told him, "If you want meat tonight, go get it. The woods start at the fence line. There are squirrels, rabbits, deer if you're patient." Hathcock was patient. He was 9 years old. By age 12, he was the primary food provider for his household. He hunted every morning before school. Squirrel, rabbit, turkey. He wasted no shots. He had no money for ammunition beyond what his grandmother could afford, approximately 40 rounds per month. 40 rounds per month to feed a household. He learned to make every round count. At the same time, his left eye began to fail. The degradation was gradual. First, he noticed difficulty reading the blackboard at school. Then, difficulty identifying faces at distances beyond 20 feet. By age 14, his left eye had effectively stopped functioning for anything requiring detail resolution. He adapted. He didn't tell his grandmother. He didn't tell his teachers. He simply adjusted. He closed his left eye entirely when aiming and taught himself to calculate depth, distance, and windage using his right eye alone. Most people have 2 eyes for a reason. Binocular vision gives the brain 2 slightly different images from 2 slightly different positions. The brain triangulates those images to calculate depth. Depth perception, the ability to judge how far away something is, depends almost entirely on this triangulation. Remove one eye, the triangulation stops. You can still see,
But judging distance becomes a calculation problem, not an instinct. For a marksman, distance is everything. Range dictates bullet drop. Bullet drop dictates where you aim. Aim wrong by 3 inches at 200 yards. Aim wrong by 2 feet at 800 yards. Hathcock, with one functioning eye, had to solve a problem that the human body normally solves automatically. He had to replace an involuntary biological process with a conscious, learned calculation. He spent 6 years doing exactly that. He developed a system of environmental ranging, using known object sizes to calculate distance without binocular depth perception. A standing adult human is approximately 68 inches tall. At 100 yards, that figure in a standard scope subtends a specific number of mils. At 200 yards, half as many. At 400 yards, half again. He memorized these relationships, not approximately, precisely. He could identify the range of a human target to within plus or minus 15 yards at distances up to 600 yards using scope subtension alone. He was 17 when he completed this system. He tested it at a shooting competition in Geyer Springs, Arkansas. He won. At 18, he joined the United States Marine Corps. His enlistment medical examination noted the left eye deficiency. The examiner recorded it. No one flagged it. No one failed him. He was otherwise physically exceptional. 5'10", 165 pounds, cardiovascular fitness in the 94th percentile. He was assigned to infantry. His first marksmanship qualification? 248 out of 250 possible points. The qualifying officer called the score a clerical error and made him reshoot. Hathcock scored 249. The qualifying officer approved the score without comment and assigned Hathcock to the base rifle team at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Over the next 3 years, Hathcock competed in national marksmanship competitions. He won the Wimbledon Cup, the most prestigious long-range rifle championship in the United States, in 1965. The Wimbledon Cup is fired at 1,000 yards. Hathcock fired it with one functioning eye. He won. No one watching knew his secret. When he was assigned to Vietnam in 1966, Hathcock was 24 years old, the reigning national long-range rifle champion, and had been functionally monocular for 7 years. He had told no one. He would not tell anyone for 11 more years. He was 17 years old when he completed a ranging system that no military academy had ever designed. Built it entirely in his head, alone, because he had no choice. If that kind of story is why you're here, this channel is built for you. Every video we make is a file on a person history forgot, a story the textbook skipped, a name that deserves to be spoken out loud. Hit that like button right now, not at the end, now. Here's why it matters. YouTube decides in the first 10 minutes whether to show this video to 10,000 more people or let it disappear. Your like in this window is worth more than 10 likes at the end. You are literally deciding whether this story reaches people or gets buried again. Hit it, then share this with one person who respects stories like this. Not a mass share, one person, the right person. And answer this in the comments. What limitation have you turned into an advantage? Hathcock built his entire method from what he couldn't do. If you've done something similar, in sport, in work, in life, I want to read it. Drop it below. Because this story isn't just about a sniper. It's about what happens when you stop calling it a problem and start calling it a condition. Chapter 2. Vietnam, 1966. The war that built the legend.
Vietnam, 1966. The United States Marine Corps operated in I Corps, the northernmost military region of South Vietnam. The terrain was a combination of coastal plains, dense jungle, rice paddies, and highland ridgelines. Visibility ranged from 2 kilometers across open paddy to 15 meters inside triple canopy jungle. The enemy were experienced, patient, and operating in familiar terrain. The North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong had been fighting continuously since 1945, first against French colonial forces, then against the South Vietnamese, then against the Americans. Many NVA commanders had 20 years of combat experience. They understood jungle warfare at an operational level the Americans were still learning. They also had snipers. NVA snipers operated with Soviet Mosin Nagant 9130 rifles, fitted with PU scopes, the same combination that had proven devastating on the Eastern Front in World War II. They were patient, effective, and deeply familiar with the terrain. American casualties from sniper fire in 1965 and 1966 were creating a specific problem. Not just combat deaths, those were expected. The psychological problem. A unit could move through an area for 3 hours without contact, then lose one man to a single shot from a concealed position, and the effect on morale was disproportionate to a single casualty. The Marine Corps' response was the establishment of formal sniper training at Da Nang, South Vietnam, in 1966. The program was commanded by Captain Jim Land. Land needed an instructor. He requested Hathcock. Carlos Hathcock arrived at Da Nang in early 1966. He was assigned simultaneously as instructor and active duty sniper. He would teach students in the morning, he would conduct operations in the afternoon. His confirmed kill count when he arrived, 0. His confirmed kill count 60 days later, 38. His method was unlike anything the Marine Corps had formally documented. The manual prescribed specific distances, specific positions, specific engagement protocols. Hathcock ignored most of them. Not out of arrogance, out of adaptation. His one-eye limitation had forced him to develop compensatory techniques that, when applied to combat sniping, proved significantly more effective than the standard methodology. He was not supposed to be better than men with 2 eyes. He was better than every sniper the Marine Corps had.
63 days into his deployment, Hathcock nearly died, not from enemy fire, from his own method. September 14, 1966, Hathcock was operating with a spotter, Lance Corporal John Burke, in the Go Noi Island region south of Da Nang. They were hunting a North Vietnamese Army sniper who had killed 7 Marines in 11 days. The NVA sniper was skilled. He operated from different positions each day. He fired once, sometimes twice, then relocated before counterfire could be directed at him. He'd been tracked for 6 days without success. Hathcock and Burke set up on a ridgeline 600 meters from the NVA sniper's suspected operating area. They waited 8 hours. Nothing. At 3:30 p.m., Hathcock made a decision that violated the manual. He moved closer. The manual said hold position, wait for the enemy to show. The manual assumed both parties had equal fields of view, equal ability to detect each other at range. But Hathcock had only one functioning eye. His detection capability at 600 meters was degraded relative to a binocular shooter. He'd compensated for this in training. He knew exactly how much his effective detection range was reduced, approximately 22% at distances beyond 400 meters. He'd calculated this over years of practice, though he'd told no one the reason for the calculation. Moving closer reduced his blind spot exposure. At 380 meters, his single-eye acuity was sufficient for reliable target acquisition. He moved. He and Burke relocated to a new position 380 meters from the tree line. At 4:47 p.m., Burke whispered, 10 o'clock, movement, inside the tree line. Hathcock acquired the target through his scope, a figure moving laterally through the trees, 380 meters. The figure paused. Hathcock identified a rifle, a long, scoped rifle, and a face turned toward him. The NVA sniper had also acquired him. They were looking directly at each other through their respective scopes. One of them would fire first. The manual said this situation should not occur. The manual said a properly positioned sniper should never be in a mutual acquisition situation. The manual assumed detection would happen at range before close approach. The manual had not accounted for a monocular shooter who needed to close distance. Hathcock was 380 meters from an NVA sniper who was looking at him through a 4x scope. He had approximately 1.5 seconds before the NVA sniper fired. Here is what Hathcock knew in that 1.5 seconds that the manual did not teach. A bullet fired through the center of an enemy's scope travels the exact same optical axis as the image the scope is projecting. If the enemy sniper is looking at you through his scope is pointed at you, his barrel is pointed at you. Aim at the lens of the scope. Fire. The bullet will travel down the exact line the scope is using to see you. It will enter through the glass. Hathcock fired. The shot traveled 380 meters in approximately 0.45 seconds. It entered the NVA sniper's scope. It killed him instantly. Hathcock didn't move for 11 minutes. He waited to confirm no secondary threat. He controlled his breathing. He allowed his heart rate to return to baseline. Then he and Burke withdrew. The NVA sniper had fired simultaneously. His round passed through the space Hathcock had occupied 0.2 seconds before Hathcock's round hit his scope. The margin was 0.2 seconds and the decision to fire first. That decision was not in any manual. Hathcock had made it alone in 1.5 seconds with one eye at 380 meters. When Burke asked him afterward how he knew to aim at the scope, Hathcock said, "Because he was looking at me. Wherever the scope is looking, the barrel is pointing." Burke said, "That's not in the manual." Hathcock said, "I know." Before we go any further, that scope shot is the most famous moment in sniper history, but it is not why Hathcock was the most decorated. It is not even his most difficult shot. The shot that earned him his reputation, the one that made NVA commanders put a $30,000 bounty on his head, that shot happened 3 months later. If you're not subscribed, do it now, because this story gets harder to believe the further we go.
By November 1966, the North Vietnamese Army had a specific problem. Her name in their intelligence reports was Lông Trắng, White Feather. The NVA had identified Hathcock's operational signature. He wore a single white feather in the band of his bush hat. It was a personal statement, a deliberate act of psychological visibility in a profession built on invisibility. He wore it to be known, to be feared, to be hunted. Because if the NVA were hunting him, they were not hunting his students. The NVA placed a bounty on White Feather in late October 1966. The amount? $30,000 American dollars. For context, the average NVA soldier earned the equivalent of $11 US per month. The bounty was the equivalent of 227 years of salary. Every sniper unit, every special operations element, every hunter team in I Corps was redirected. Find White Feather. Bring his head. They sent 45 snipers, not a team, 45 individual snipers deployed into Hathcock's operating area with orders to find and kill one man. Hathcock was informed by Marine intelligence on November 3, 1966. His response? He kept wearing the white feather. Over the following 6 weeks, Hathcock killed 8 of the 45 NVA snipers sent to kill him. 8 confirmed. The others withdrew or were unable to locate him. The methodology he used against hunter teams was a direct product of his monocular limitation, and it was the reason he survived. Here is the problem with hunting a sniper who can only use one eye. Normal counter-sniper doctrine assumes the enemy sniper will maintain elevated positions to maximize field of view. Elevated positions are logical for two-eyed shooters. Height extends detection range. But Hathcock, with degraded monocular depth perception, preferred low positions, ground level, prone, submerged, positions where the environmental distance cues he relied on, object size relationships at range, were most consistent and reliable. Low positions in jungle terrain are also the hardest to detect, the hardest to engage, and the hardest to flank. The NVA hunter teams were looking up. Hathcock was on the ground. They searched ridgelines. He was in the paddies below. He was systematically hunting people who were systematically looking in the wrong places because they built their search doctrine around assumptions that didn't apply to him. His limitation, the one that should have disqualified him, was actively making him harder to kill. On November 17, 1966, an NVA hunter team of 3 snipers set up on a ridgeline overlooking a valley Hathcock had been known to operate in. They set up at 0400 hours, before first light. Their position was excellent. Commanding field of view, good concealment, 3 interlocking arcs of fire. Hathcock was already in the valley. He had been there since 2300 hours the previous night. He had heard them arrive. He had watched them set up through his night-adjusted right eye. He had not moved. By 6:30, he had identified all 3 positions. He needed to eliminate all 3 before any could fire or communicate. He waited for a single moment, when all three were simultaneously in his field of view from his prone position. The geometry required him to wait for a specific angle. At 7:1400 hours, the sun crested the ridgeline. For approximately 8 seconds, all three positions were backlit. In those 8 seconds, Hathcock fired 3 times. 3 shots, 3 kills, 8 seconds. He had cycled his bolt between shots in an average of 2.4 seconds, close to the mechanical limit of a bolt-action rifle. He used his scope elevation to shift between targets rather than moving his body. He did not move his body because moving his body would have disrupted his ranging geometry. His one-eye compensation system required a stable head position relative to the scope eyepiece. If his head moved significantly between shots, his depth estimate calculations reset. He had engineered a shooting technique specifically around the constraint of monocular vision, and that technique, staying perfectly still, using scope controls rather than body movement, firing between heartbeats, was functionally superior to the two-eyed alternative in multi-target rapid engagement scenarios. His method, never taught, never documented, born entirely from a disability he was required to hide. 3 kills, 8 seconds, 1 eye. The bounty was raised to $50,000. He kept wearing the feather. Hathcock had 56 confirmed kills at this point. In the next 14 days, he would attempt the most dangerous individual operation of the entire Vietnam War. 1 man, 1,400 meters of open rice paddy, 40 guards, a general. Drop a comment right now and tell me, would you have crawled into that paddy? Because I want to know your answer before I tell you what happened. Keep watching.
We are back to September 3rd, 1944. Except that date is wrong. The year is 1966. Hold that. I will come back to it. It is 5:14 a.m. Hathcock has been in the paddy for 53 hours. Here is what 53 hours prone in a Vietnamese rice paddy actually means. The paddy water temperature was 34 degrees Celsius, body temperature. This meant Hathcock's body could not shed heat. His core temperature had been elevated for 2 days, mild hyperthermia. Concentration degraded by approximately 15% from baseline. Reaction time slowed by 9%. He knew this. He had calculated it. His hands, submerged for 53 hours, had developed peripheral neuropathy from sustained pressure on capillaries. He could feel his right hand, his trigger hand, at approximately 60% normal sensation. He had planned for this too. He had positioned his trigger finger on the guard, not the trigger, for the final 4 hours. He would move it to the trigger only at the moment of acquisition. This preserved maximum sensation in the trigger finger for the moment it mattered. His left eye was, as always, closed. His right eye was on the scope. The command tent was 900 meters away. The NVA general, a brigade commander responsible for coordinating operations that had killed 31 Marines in the preceding 3 weeks, emerged from the tent at 5:16 a.m. He was wearing a khaki uniform. He was holding a ceramic mug. He walked to a small table outside the tent and sat down. He was 900 meters away. Through Hathcock's 8-power scope, he appeared to be 112.5 meters away. At 900 meters, the .30-06 Springfield round from Hathcock's Winchester Model 70 would drop approximately 50 inches from the bore line. It would take 1.2 seconds to arrive. Wind, 7 miles per hour from the northeast. Wind drift at 900 meters, 14 inches to the left. Hathcock needed to aim 50 inches high and 14 inches right of center mass from 900 meters away. With one eye, after 53 hours without sleep in a rice paddy, with 60% sensation in his trigger hand. He controlled his breathing, 4-second inhale, 6-second exhale. At the trough of the exhale, when the lungs are emptied and the body is momentarily still, between heartbeats, he moved his trigger finger onto the trigger. The general picked up his mug. Hathcock applied 2.3 pounds of pressure to a 3-pound trigger pull. He waited for the next heartbeat trough. He applied the final 0.7 pounds of pressure. The rifle fired. 1.2 seconds. 900 meters. The general did not put his mug down. Hathcock did not wait to confirm. He began his withdrawal, the same 1,400-meter crawl in reverse. The withdrawal would take 31 hours. He moved only when the wind moved. He moved only when sound covered him. When Marine intelligence debriefed him 3 days later, he confirmed 1 kill,
A senior NVA officer, command tent, coordinates recorded, 05:17 hours local. The intelligence officer asked how long the operation had taken. Hathcock said, from insertion to extraction, about 5.5 days. The officer looked at the map, the distance from the Marine line to the target and back, open paddy the entire way. He said, "How did you cross 1,400 meters of open paddy in the daytime without being detected?" Hathcock said, "I didn't cross it in the daytime. I moved when it was safe to move, and I didn't move when it wasn't. The crossing took 53 hours one way." The officer said nothing for a long time. Then, "The manual says maximum approach distance in open terrain is 200 meters. Hathcock said, "I know." 53 hours, 1,400 meters, one eye, 900-meter shot. There is nothing in any military manual anywhere in the world that accounts for what Hathcock just did, because the manual was written for men with 2 eyes, 2 days of sleep, and 200 meters of approach. He had none of those things, and he was only halfway through his deployment. I need you to stay with me for the second half, because what happened in 1969, what happened on that burning vehicle on Highway 1, is the moment that tells you everything about who this man actually was. Stay here.
September 16th, 1969. Hathcock was on his second Vietnam deployment. He was 27 years old. He had 93 confirmed kills. He had been awarded the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with Combat V, multiple Purple Hearts, and Navy Commendation Medals. He was the most decorated active-duty sniper in the United States Marine Corps. He was also showing the first external symptoms of multiple sclerosis. He did not know this yet. The symptoms presented as intermittent numbness in his extremities, which he attributed to the sustained prone positions, as tremors in his hands, which he attributed to sustained tension, as brief episodes of double vision in his right eye. His right eye, his only functioning eye. He had spent his entire career compensating for one non-functioning eye. Now the other one was developing episodes of degraded function. He told no one. On September 16, 1969, Hathcock was in a mechanical mule, a small, flatbed military utility vehicle, moving along Highway 1 with 7 other Marines returning from a patrol. The vehicle hit an anti-tank mine. The mine had been placed under the road surface. The explosive charge was a 10-pound TNT device with a pressure fuse. At the moment of detonation, the charge produced a blast overpressure of approximately 200 pounds per square inch at vehicle floor level. The mechanical mule disintegrated. The fuel tank, ruptured by the blast, ignited immediately. In the first 2 seconds after detonation, the vehicle was on fire. Hathcock was thrown 8 feet by the blast. He landed on road surface. He had second-degree burns on 43% of his body: hands, arms, neck, face. He was conscious. In the next 4 seconds, he assessed. Vehicle destroyed, burning, 7 other Marines. He got up. Hathcock, with second-degree burns across 43% of his body, re-entered the burning vehicle 7 times. 7. He pulled out 6 surviving Marines. 1 was already dead. On the 7th re-entry, his clothing was on fire. Other Marines dragged him away from the vehicle. He had been in the fire for approximately 90 seconds total. His hands, his right hand, his trigger hand, the hand with which he had fired every shot of his career, were burned severely enough to cause permanent scarring across the palmar surface. He would never shoot at competition level again. He would never return to Vietnam. He was awarded the Silver Star for the vehicle action. When the citation was written, it described his actions as extraordinary heroism. Hathcock's response when someone mentioned the medal: "I didn't do it for a medal. 6 of those men had families. I could still walk. I went back in." There is no technique for this in any manual, no protocol. No doctrine covers a decorated sniper with second-degree burns re-entering a burning vehicle. It is simply a man deciding 6 times in succession to go back in to fire. 6 decisions, each one made in approximately 3 seconds.
Hathcock made them the same way he made every decision in a paddy line, or a tree line, or a mutual acquisition standoff at 380 meters. Alone, immediately, without hesitation. The disability was irrelevant. The manual was irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was the decision in front of him.
Carlos Hathcock returned to the United States in late 1969. His burns healed. His hands functioned, scarred, reduced in sensitivity, but functional. In 1971, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is a neurological condition in which the immune system attacks the myelin sheath surrounding nerve fibers. The degradation is progressive. The symptoms Hathcock had been experiencing since 1968, the numbness, the hand tremors, the episodes of visual disruption, had all been early MS. He had been shooting through the early onset of multiple sclerosis. He had attributed the symptoms to field conditions and told no one. His MS progressed rapidly after diagnosis. By 1975, he was using a cane. By 1979, he required a wheelchair on bad days. The Marine Corps allowed him to remain on active duty in a training capacity. He taught at the Scout Sniper School at Quantico, Virginia. His students included men who would go on to set sniper records in subsequent conflicts. His teaching emphasized one thing above all others: technique built from personal understanding, not manual compliance. He told his students, "The manual tells you what works for the average shooter. You are not the average shooter. Find out what works for you, then build a method around it. The manual catches up to good shooters eventually, but you don't have time to wait for the manual." None of his students knew about his left eye until 1977. In 1977, Hathcock gave a recorded interview for a Marine Corps historical archive. For the first time, he disclosed the left eye deficiency. The interviewer asked, "When did you first realize this was a problem?" Hathcock said, "I never thought of it as a problem. I thought of it as a different set of conditions. Problems need solutions. Conditions need adaptations." The interviewer asked, "Did it ever affect your performance?" Hathcock paused for 4 seconds. He said, "My left eye didn't function, so I adapted. Every technique I developed, every adjustment I made, all of it came from needing to compensate for one eye. The compensation turned out to be a more effective method than the standard approach for certain applications. So in a way, the limitation built the technique built the record." He paused again. You can't separate the limitation from the achievement. They're the same thing. Hathcock spent his entire career operating under a limitation that should have ended it before it began. His most effective techniques were built from that limitation. Stories like this are what we make these videos for. They don't appear in textbooks. They get filed in archives and forgotten. If you want to be here when we open the next file, subscribe, hit the bell. It takes 3 seconds, and it tells YouTube this story deserves to be seen by more people. Because it does. Carlos Norman Hathcock II retired from the United States Marine Corps in 1979. He was 37 years old. His MFs had progressed to a level that made continued active duty impossible. He settled in Virginia Beach, Virginia, with his wife Joanne, whom he had married in 1962. They had one son, Carlos III. He spent the 1980s in increasing physical difficulty. The MS continued its progression. By 1985, he was largely housebound on difficult days. His hands, already scarred from the 1969 mine, lost coordination during flare episodes. He could no longer hold a rifle steadily. He did not complain about this. People who met him in the 1980s described him as quiet, warm, and indisclined to discuss the war unless specifically asked. He was active in veterans organizations. He answered letters from Marines and their families. He received thousands of letters. Many were from young Marines who had read about him and were training to become snipers. They asked for technique. He answered every letter by hand, in detail. His advice was always the same. Learn the fundamentals until they are unconscious. Then forget the manual and learn yourself. Your best method is the one that accounts for your specific limitations. Find them, then build around them. In 1986, a book about Hathcock's Vietnam service, Marine Sniper by Charles Henderson, was published. It became a bestseller. It introduced Hathcock to a public audience. The left eye detail was in the book. The response surprised Hathcock. He had expected dismissal,
a sense that his record was somehow diminished by the disclosure. Instead, the response was the opposite. Veterans wrote to him about their own hidden limitations. A Marine who had served with partial hearing loss, a Navy officer with a hand tremor he had concealed, a soldier who had been colorblind his entire service and never disclosed it. They wrote because Hathcock's story gave them language for their own experience. The limitation built the technique built the record. Carlos Hathcock died February 23, 1999. He was 56 years old. Multiple sclerosis had progressed to a severity that caused cardiac complications. He died at home in Virginia Beach. His wife Joanne and son Carlos III were with him. His funeral was attended by hundreds of Marines, active duty, retired, from multiple generations, men who had never met him but who had learned from him through his students, through the manual that was quietly rewritten to incorporate techniques he had invented with one eye in a Vietnamese paddy field. He was buried in Hampton National Cemetery, Virginia. His headstone reads, Carlos N. Hathcock II, Sergeant Major, USMC, May 20, 1942, February 23, 1999, Vietnam. No mention of 93 kills, no mention of the white feather, no mention of one eye, or the 5.5 days in the paddy, or the 7 entries into a burning vehicle, or the shooting method that no manual taught and no manual could have invented. Just his name, his rank, his service, his dates. He was asked once, late in his life, what he wanted people to remember about him. He said, I don't need to be remembered. The Marines I trained are still out there. They carry the method forward. That's enough. The method outlives the man. That's how it should work. He was right. In every major United States military sniper program today, elements of technique first documented from Hathcock's practice are taught as standard. Environmental ranging, scope subtension distance estimation, low position concealment priority, multi-target sequential engagement using scope adjustment rather than body repositioning. These techniques were not designed, they were not committee approved, they were compensations. Compensations built by a boy in Arkansas who couldn't miss, who couldn't see out of one eye, who decided that the limitation was simply a condition requiring a different approach. The boy became the most decorated sniper of the war. The compensation became the curriculum. 93 confirmed kills, 1 functioning eye, a method that will be taught long after his name is forgotten. And at 5:17 a.m. on September 3, 1966, not 1944, as I said at the opening, Hathcock squeezed that trigger in a Vietnamese paddy field, 900 meters from a man he didn't know he was there, with a right eye that was already showing the first tremors of multiple sclerosis, and a left eye that had never worked at all. The round arrived in 1.2 seconds. It was exactly where he had aimed. He began his crawl back. 31 hours, 1,400 meters. Not one person saw him move.